إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله تعالى عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قال الله تبارك وتعالى يا أيها الذين آمنوا إنما الخمر والميسر والأنصاب والأزلام رجس من عمل الشيطان فاجتنبوه لعلكم تفلحون إنما يريد الشيطان أن يوقع بينكم العداوة والبغضاء في الخمر والميسر ويصدكم عن ذكر الله وعن الصلاة فهل أنتم منتهون صدق الله العظيم اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد كلما ذكره الذاكرون وصل على سيدنا مولانا محمد كلما غفل عن ذكره الغافلون اللهم صل وسلم على عبدك ورسولك اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد أفضل صلواتك. My respected brothers and sisters and honorable elders, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today, I would like to talk to you about one of the social ills that not only Islam has banned and prohibited for Muslims, but any society that has or that believes in values of social justice and fairness and equalities and equal opportunity, they also believe that such ills of the society should not be allowed to prevail and should not be allowed to persist. I recited before you an ayah from Surah Al-Ma'idah, ayah number 90, chapter 5. In this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought to our attention those social ills which are banned in Islam. They're considered haram to the furthest extent. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu, innamal khamru wal maisir. O believers, wine, liquor, drinking, or intoxicants, in other words, and gambling, wal ansab, and altar stones, wal azlam, and divination through arrows, are all filth, an act of shaitan. Rijsun min amal shaitan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first introduced us to these things, these social practices that were there even before Islam. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala pointed them out. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not point out something that was going to happen centuries later. It was something that was already happening in the Arab society. And the things that were happening was intoxication through drinking of wine, liquor, through khamr, and through gambling, and through the altar stones, sacrificing things in the name of someone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also the divination through arrows. These are the 4 practices that are mentioned here in this ayah of the Quran. Another social ill that has not been mentioned here, but mentioned elsewhere, is riba, usury or interest, which is also prohibited in Islam. But the things that are mentioned here, they are of very common practices. Sometimes people might be involved in one of these social ills without even realizing that they are involved in a major crime in Islam. Let's take this first thing, for example. Drinking. Now, drinking, for most Muslims, alhamdulillah, they stay away from drinking. And for us, we should understand very clearly that anything that we are not allowed to consume for ourselves, we're not allowed to engage in the buying and selling of that item. So if we are not allowed to consume liquor, we're not allowed to sell liquor either, in any quantity. Selling liquor is considered haram according to all the scholars. There will be no scholar who will give you a second opinion on this issue. There are many issues that we can find different opinions about. But this is one of those issues that are unanimous and built on consensus of the scholars. Because it is proven through the clear and straightforward verses of the Quran. So if we are not allowed to consume liquor, we're not allowed to sell or buy liquor either. As a matter of fact, liquor or drinking is one thing that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has extended the prohibition of liquor to nearly 10 people. And among those 10 people, one is obviously the one who's consuming, the consumer of the liquor, the one who's drinking. Another person is the one who's buying the liquor. Another person is the one who's selling the liquor. Another person is the one who's delivering the liquor. By any means, delivering a small delivery or a large delivery, a truckload, regardless of how much you deliver or how you deliver, all of that is included in this prohibition of liquor. And then the second one is maisir. Another word for maisir in Islam is qimar, in Arabic language. What is maisir? What is qimar? Anytime someone risks their money by or at the cost of the loss of someone. When two people are pooling their money together, one will lose and one will gain. That's an open definition of gambling. In words of some scholars, one will become ghanim and the other one will become gharim. Ghanim means someone who gains an outcome. And gharim is someone who will lose. So one loses completely and one wins completely. That's what happens in gambling. And gambling, by the way, can be of very small scale and can be of a massive scale. Look at the lottery, the state lottery or the national lottery or the regional lottery. Every day, millions of Americans play lottery. And it's part of their habit. And these sins that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned here, these social ills, they're very addictive. Once you fall into the cycle, then you become an addict. Then you can never pull yourself out of there unless you go through rehabilitation. That's why people who drink heavily, if they want to recover from that habit, they have to go through rehabilitation. They have to go through that process. Likewise, those who are addicted to gambling, you cannot pull them away from a casino, or you cannot pull them away from the lottery tickets. They will inevitably fall into the trap again and again and again. Because it is the trap of shaitan. Shaitan has created that trap. That once you get into that trap, shaitan will do everything in his power to not allow you to come out of there. So, lottery is one of the clear definitions of gambling that unfortunately most people would fail to realize, would fail to understand that lottery is gambling. And the most compelling argument that convinces them to believe that it is not gambling is because they say, oh, I'm only putting $5. I'm only buying a $5 ticket, but if I win, I might win $1 million. But you don't understand that if you lose all $5. You don't get a penny back. And here's the other thing. In lottery, and especially on this massive scale, this is how shaitan plays with our minds. In old times, all these social ills were on small scale. The divination through arrows is also another demonstration of lottery. The divination through arrows was a practice that Arabs had before Islam. So 10 people would put their money together and buy a camel. And then they would slaughter the camel. And now a common understanding is that they should divide the meat in 10 shares and each person should have an equal share. But that's not how they would distribute the meat. They had this practice called istiqsam bil azlam. So what they would do, they had 10 arrows. From these 10 arrows, 7 arrows would have either 1 share or 2 shares or 3 shares, certain number of shares. So 1 share would say 1, another one would say 2, another one might say 3, and then another one might say 1. So 7 of those 10 arrows would each have a designation, a number. 3 were blank. So in order to distribute this meat, All 10 people would participate and they would all chip in money. And the common sense says that each is entitled to one equal share of that meat. But in distributing the meat of that camel, they would put all 10 arrows in a box and shake it very well. And once it's all mixed up and all shaken, then each person would pick one arrow. Now whoever picked an arrow that had 3 shares, he would get 3 shares of that meat. And if someone picked up an arrow that had no share, he would get nothing. He would lose completely. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called it haram. He made it haram. He said, this is zulm. What about those 3 people who lost everything? They also pitched in money. They also invested their money. But they lost everything at the benefit of these people. These people gained. They either got what they deserved or they got more than what they deserved. But 3 people lost everything. And this is zulm. This is unfair. This is oppression. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not allow that to happen. In Islam, there is no ruling, there is no commandment, there is no hukum that will tolerate zulm upon anyone. In Islam, zulm is not tolerated for children, zulm is not tolerated for women, zulm is not tolerated for men, zulm is not tolerated for elderly, zulm is not even tolerated for the deceased. Someone who passed away. If you are not handling the corpse of that deceased person, even that will be considered zulm, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not tolerate that either. So, in old days, as I was saying, in old days, there were these simple demonstrations of these social ills. This was a big problem and a clear social ill, but it was a very simple one. Not a complicated one, not a sophisticated one, and not the one that was done on a massive scale. And now fast forward to this 21st century, where lottery is being played by millions of people every single day. How many of those millions of people win anything every single day? If you were to say 1 in 10 million, you would be wrong. The number of winners is even less than 1 in 10 million. So, this one person who's winning, he's winning at the loss of those 10 million people. 10 million people had to lose whatever they put in, and this one person won. And this is obviously a problem. In Islam, we learn the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam where he said, "La darara wa la darar." You should not take harm for yourself, neither should you cause harm to anyone else. You should not be harmed, and you should not harm others. But by getting involved in this, by playing lottery, by selling lottery, by promoting lottery, all of those things, you are becoming part of that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. O believers, do not help each other on matters of sin and on matters of transgression. It is one of those matters. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullahi alayh, talking about these social ills, And in particular, the ill of gambling. He said, أَنَّ مُفْسِدَةَ الْمَيْسَرْ أَعْظَمُ مِنْ مُفْسِدَةِ الرِّبَى. He said in some ways, the evil of gambling is even greater than the evil of usury. And then he said, فَتَبَيَّنَ أَنَّ الْمَيْسَرَ اشْتَمَلَ عَلَى مُفْسِدَتَيْنِ. The evil of gambling involves two evils. Is made of two evils. مُفْسِدَةٌ فِي الْمَالِ وَهِيَ أَكْلُهُ بِالْبَاطِلِ. One is the evil of wealth. And that happens when you take the wealth of others unlawfully. This is unlawful, illegitimate wealth. وَمُفْسِدَةٌ فِي الْعَمَلِ. And also the evil of practice. وَهِيَ مَا فِيهِ مِنْ مُفْسِدِ الْمَالِ وَفَسَادِ الْقَلْبِ وَالْعَقْلِ. And by doing that, you corrupt your wealth, you corrupt your heart, you corrupt your intelligence, and you create problems between people. وَفَسَادِ ذَاتِ الْبَيْنِ. وَكُلٌّ مِنَ الْمُفْسِدَتَيْنِ مُسْتَقِلَّةٌ بِالنَّهِي. Each of these issues, each of these ills are forbidden by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَيُنْهَى عَنْ أَكْلِ الْمَالِ بِالْبَاطِلِ مُطْلَقًا وَلَوْ كَانَ بِغَيْرِ مَيْسَرٍ كَالرِّبَى. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in another verse, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لَا تَأْكُلُوا أَمْوَالَكُمْ بَيْنَكُمْ بِالْبَاطِلِ. O believers, do not devour each other's wealth unlawfully. And anything that prevents you from the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's automatically fallen into this category. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prevents from that. And Ibn al-Qayyim rahmatullahi alayhi said that this is that kind of evil. The more you get involved, the more you fall into it. If you win $5 one day, next day you hope that you're going to win $10. If you win $10, the day after that you hope you're going to win $20. So shaitan keeps dragging you farther and farther into the same problem. And I said to one person one day, I saw him playing lottery. I asked him, how many times have you won this lottery? He said, I have won 10 times. I said, that's wonderful, you won 10 times. And then I asked him, how long have you been playing lottery? He said, I've been playing for 20 years. Every day I play. I said, so who's the loser? Who's losing the money? You've been playing for 20 years. Every single day of your life. And you have won only 10 times. Who's a real loser here? But shaitan doesn't allow us to think that way. Shaitan only allows us to think the other way, that, oh, I won 10 times. So he's not sorry for losing for 20 years, but he's happy for winning 10 times. That's how shaitan plays with our minds. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala pointed out towards the spiritual harms that the gambling causes, drinking causes, and the other social ills, lottery or all others. People put everything. Ibn al-Qayyim rahmatullahi alayhi said that Arabs before Islam, they used to bet everything in their gambling. They used to bet everything that belonged to them, everything that they owned. So much so that they even put their families on the hook. And they would lose. It's an obvious equation. Someone has to lose. And most people lose. So when they had lost everything, they would be sorry for the rest of their life. And this causes enmity, hatred, and malice between people. A loser will never wish you well. Will never say, God bless you. Have all my wealth, God bless you. He will have this hatred in his heart for you. He will have these really, really bad feelings. And he will try to take those feelings out on you at some point. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ الشَّيْطَانُ أَن يُوقِعَ بَيْنَكُمُ الْعَدَاوَةَ وَالْبَغْضَاءَ فِي الْخَمْرِ وَالْمَيْسِرِ. Shaitan wants nothing but to cause enmity and hatred between you through gambling and through drinking. وَيَصُدَّكُمْ عَنْ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ وَعَنِ الصَّلَاةِ. And Shaitan wants to hinder you from the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَهَلْ أَنْتُمْ مُنْتَهُونَ? So will you then abstain? Will you then stop? And when these ayahs were revealed, Umar radiallahu anhu stood up and he said, Intahayna, intahayna. Well, Allah, we have abstained. They did not play that before either. But it was a response to the question of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to practice on Sunnah Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Ameen wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillah rabbil alamin.
Allah